in these areas, and so you're going to get to hear my thoughts and opinions today. As you look at this, probably something that in all of our intro classes we would say, but I think we need to always remind ourselves that in the agricultural sector, I think we have some fundamental questions that are going to keep coming up that affect both production and policy. I think we're being asked to produce more to feed a hungry world. We are being asked to meet an increasing demand for differentiated product attributes, things like organic, locally grown, and so forth. And we are being asked to do all of the above with fewer resources and less environmental harm. In the end, I think those three fundamental issues mean that our profession is going to be busy for decades to come. I want to begin by looking backwards because in 2010, Chavaz, Chambers, and Pope wrote a review piece of kind of where our profession had been over the past century. And I was struck when I went back and reread that article of the things that they touched upon that still are so very relevant today. The application of economic theory to agricultural decision makers, the role of risk, the term productivity shows up a lot, technological change, intertemporal investments. You see a list there of issues, very few of whom have gone away. We are still dealing with these issues. They just continue to transform in many respects. So having taken that look backward, then I would say, what are the questions for us moving forward? Obviously, I think technological change will continue and it will cause issues for us to address. The question of adoption of new technologies, the implications for the environment, for the profitability, those kind of things. And as I teach my undergraduate policy class, what strikes me over the years is that so many of the policy questions that we address on Capitol Hill or in other governmental debates really stem from some form of technological change that creates a disequilibrium in which we have to address. A very important question that I think we as ag economists need to continue to answer is the question of productivity measurement. A very worthwhile endeavor. It takes high quality data to do this. And finally, I think our profession needs to always remind itself that the estimation of quality elasticities, both from the supply and the demand side, are fundamental to doing much of our work, and the need for us to recognize and respect the development of those kind of elasticities is fundamentally important. The paper that I referred to a minute ago talked about risk a great deal. It seems to me that that's still an issue for our profession to address. I think there are looming issues out there for us to understand, such as risk attitudes, which I think we still have room to grow and develop better models. The important aspect that so often many of the really relevant issues that are involved in risk also have a temporal dimension. Both models of the behavior and when confronted with mixed, uncertain, and temporal problems, and also the quantification of these are still areas that I think we can pursue and provide better analysis. I think we are increasingly aware with the advent of more behavioral economics, errors in subjective perception, and the importance of subjective perception in understanding decision-maker behavior. I think all of this relates to the application of behavioral economics as we try to understand how people make farm management decisions, how they manage the environment, and so forth. I think another area, and I'll touch upon this again later on, but I believe it is, we will continue to be asked to consider the production/environmental interface in various forms, these issues will be important for us to try to address from an economic standpoint and from a policy standpoint. An example that is related to this, but has caught a lot of attention, will continue to, is the climate change issue. A wonderful example of the production/environmental concerns. I also will mention that given where I think we are in U.S. agriculture, there is the potential with the trade situation and the price outlook that while we're not there yet, I think that ag finance is an area that we probably have, in the good times, not paid enough attention to, and likely we need to be revisiting a lot of those issues and skill sets. I also argued the other day when I made the presentation is that we as a profession cannot go it alone. Many of the wicked problems, that's a popular term these days, require multidisciplinary teams. I think it is essential that in many instances economists have been left out of the team and the project suffered for it, but also that we have to be willing to reach out to other disciplines as well. I think that looking forward, many of the strategic alliances that our profession needs will involve the environmental sciences, climate sciences, health sciences, computer sciences, and that list could go on and on. So an area that I'm very intrigued by of late is how do we play a role in the big data movement, so I share a few thoughts about that today. I think to a certain degree our discipline is late to the game, that we need to catch up. I would encourage people to look at what Hal Varian and Susan Athey, mainstream economists, what they have been doing in this realm. But I think ultimately we have the training and the ability to deal with messy data. In many instances, what we're talking about in this area will be messy data that our skill set will be relatively useful in addressing. I think that the potential for big data is going to make farm management exciting again. I went to grad school because I was interested in farm management, migrated away from it because I became more intrigued by risk. But I think some of the decision-making softwares, some of the data that is available today is going to make this an exciting area to revisit. I think it is extraordinarily important for us as a profession to think about access to this data. If we as university researchers do not have access to data, we're not going to be able to do that analysis. Having seen what James Verkaman is going to talk about later, I think I want to echo what he's going to tell you about the access to data and the importance of it. I think we're going to need to revise our teaching and extension of programs to reflect this era of this data and the type of analysis. And I think as we look at how we play a role in this arena, I think precision farm management decision making is an area where we as economists can contribute. Supply chain processing, the traceability, the technology, the economic implications, the contractual relationships that may arise there are important. I think we as a profession can address the supply and demand information issue that may be coming away, that may be generated by this machine data. I think potentially a question that I find rather fascinating is that for decades we have had long-standing USDA programs to provide free information about markets and prices and production, and what does the advent of this new technology mean for those kind of systems that have been long-standing. I think also we have the question of market power implications of this data. Who has access to it, and what does that mean in terms of market power, and if we're talking about input suppliers, purchasers of commodities, and so forth. And I think touching back upon the environmental question, The potential for sustainability verification, environmental management, again, things that were possible, not possible in the past, are becoming much more viable in terms of this technology, this data, and that's going to provide opportunities to look at new issues there. Ultimately, I think the advent of this kind of data is going to prompt a discussion about various kinds of data that exist and how they come together. I drew this diagram to show that I think ultimately we have inside of USDA, for example, and other agencies, a significant amount of administrative data that has varying degrees of privacy protection associated with it. We're going to have precision agricultural data available, weather and input use data coming out in near real time. And then potentially we could have supplemental surveys that are going to fill in the gaps of these other two types of data. From a risk analysis standpoint, we really need multiple year panels. But I think if we as a profession can advocate for putting together the right mix of data, then we can provide better answers to policy questions in the future. Turning to the policy side of things, this is a diagram that I use a lot since I worked on Capitol Hill, demonstrating what I view as kind of the complexity of agricultural policy and environmental policy associated with agriculture in the United States. I throw out a few names here of various groups, but the maroon boxes represent the traditional groups that strongly held the agricultural policy decision-making process in the past. I think we see various advocacy groups and that have entered the arena and will have a major impact in the future of these policy discussions. And a whole host of environmental groups that I subdivide into those that are willing to deal and those that are less willing to deal. We have what I call the traditional foodies who are focused on SNAP benefits, funding for low-income family, food and nutrition services, and then the new advocates who've come along advocating for organic, local, GMO-free, and those kind of things as well. So I put this slide in here just to make the point that the political environment, I think, is much more complicated and much more divided than it has been in the past. As we look at the policy debate, this is a slide that I made after the 2014 bill passed. You saw a shift from the traditional farm programs and savings captured out of conservation programs, mostly reduction in enrollment in CRP, and a reduction in nutrition programs, and a plus up in crop insurance because there was a perception during that Farm Bill debate that risk management was the key for these farm policy programs. As we move forward, I think that it is unlikely that there is going to be a big influx of funding, and the slide that I'm showing you now reflects the fact that I think the baseline for the traditional farm programs are likely to shrink further as we move towards a 2018 discussion about farm policy in the United States. I think also as we look forward at food, agriculture, and environmental policy, I think that we as a profession have to understand that partisanship and a viciousness of the political debate will continue. When we step in that arena, we will be subject to that kind of criticism even though we come out of academia. Funding will be tight for our programs and for any kind of program that one wishes to create. In the arena of food policy, I think the question of science versus preference-based policy pops up all the time, and I think we will continue to have those kind of discussions as we move forward. In terms of agricultural policy, I think the big outstanding question as the net farm income declines, as we move from record high levels to lower levels, will that induce subsidies as it has in the past? I think my personal opinion is that that is debatable in the current political climate. Environmental policies, I think our profession has a great deal to add to these discussions. The argument of regulation versus subsidies, i.e. the carrot versus the stick, and the funding for environmental services are things where our profession can contribute significantly to that discussion. This is a slide that I like to show my friends in some other social science disciplines. I do believe that economists are quite important in this dialogue, that our profession is often sought out to provide answers to the economic implications, to discuss the possible unintended consequences. I think we will continue to have those opportunities. I think we have to understand is that I think we as a profession can do a better job of connecting the best work that our discipline produces with the policy process. I think that making our best research and analysis, putting it in a form where congressional staffers and others can understand it will make us even more valuable. Policymakers, my experience has been they want the best available answer, and if they ask you the question, say I need an answer by Friday afternoon, then you have to give them the best available answer. Said otherwise, if they want it bad, they're going to get it bad. Policymakers in Washington, D.C., I saw this firsthand when I was up there, are spoiled. They're spoiled because they are surrounded by effective communicators. Lobbyists and others in D.C. Are extraordinarily gifted at making their points in a matter of a few minutes and doing so in a way that is very understandable. And if our profession is going to be understood, we have to be as good as those folks are. I think we also have to accept a schizophrenic relationship with the policy process. There will be times when policymakers eagerly seek our answers, and there will be other times where really we're not going to be welcome because the politics is such that they are not looking for the academic answer at that moment in time. The reality of what I experienced is that those moments may be 15 minutes apart. I think one thing that we as a profession really need to worry about is that there's a general disrespect for science growing in our society. And I think that when we walk into these nasty political battles, the questions of conflict of interest, whether they are perceived or real, are going to be more important for us to be protected and provide those kind of clarities when we speak, because they will be used against us as we try to engage. I think we also have to understand that while there is enormous incentive in the political process to speak with a tone and a harshness, we have to, as a profession, I would advise to continue to remain using objective language and objective writing. That's the conclusion of my presentation, Karen, and I'll be happy to try to answer questions.
Great, thanks so much. So we don't have any questions right now, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the conversation that occurred during the breakout session, well, as I change slides. Okay. The other thing is that I also will bring up a slide for the audience's purposes where it shows them how to enter questions.
Okay. Please. Well, I think there are real opportunities. When we had our great breakout session, we talked about the opportunities that may be out there for the profession to answer with better data than we have in the past. But we also have a danger that that data is going to be locked up in a proprietary fashion where we're not having access to it. And similarly, I do think that economists must be very aware that the funding for the data collection that oftentimes is freely available to us on websites to download, it is not perfect. It could be better, and there's potential for that, but also the pressure for funding, the willingness of individuals to allow data to be collected, efforts to maintain privacy, all create a situation where I think there are some real opportunities for us to get access to better data than we've had in the past, but there's also risks that we're going to be operating in an environment where there are some traditional data sets that have been available are going to go away. And so I think we as a profession need to be proactive about those issues rather than just simply reactive.
Great, thanks so much. We do have one question that came in, and that is, should an ag economist give preferences of one policy over another if asked to do so?
I think we've got to be, I think the question is a very good one, and I think the answer is how do we do that? I think in general our profession, you know, I was taught very on is to show people the implications of all the policies and let the policymaker decide. I think there is a great need to declare your assumptions and explain them and what basis that one is answering those questions. This is a place where I think our profession needs to have a dialogue and think about how we approach this. One of the things that we can, you know, I actually had a picture in my slides of a book entitled The Honest Broker, which I think is a great read for ag economists to read, because I think one of the things is that we also can claim that we're being very unbiased and declare the language of objectivity, but not be objective. And in fact, there's great incentive kind of from a game theoretic standpoint for someone to do that. And I think when you see, you know, advocacy groups standing up, institutes and entities that have all the appearances of being highly objective, but are ultimately a tool of advocacy, they very much try to wear the mantle of objectivity even though it's not there, which makes, all of that said, makes it very difficult for the policymaker to sort through these kind of questions.
Great, thank you for that. Another question came in about drones and how you see drones playing a role in relation to big data issues.
Actually, my university is very involved in the drone issue. We have a center funded by the FAA here to work on those regulations. That's going to be an important regulatory question because it has a lot of implications for the practical use of drones in the agricultural sector. I think there's going to be tension there between wanting to freely use them and then the FAA being quite cautious about the potential for damage to occur, you know, crashes and things like that. Privacy issues as well. I think we're going to work through those because I think there's an incentive to do that. Absolutely, drones are going to be one mechanism that we collect the big data. This is one of the reasons that I think we're going to see those in our profession who are trained with spatial analytical skills are going to be quite popular in the near future because they're going to be able to analyze those maps that come off the drone, that come off the machinery, the variable rate prescriptions and so forth. I think it's going to be great fun as economists to look at these things, but many are sitting out there today trying to sort through how do we integrate these and understand those things as well. But I think we have to recognize as a profession the privacy issue is going to be paramount in the view of the farmers and others who are producing this data. I think a key thing will be for us as a profession to try to build relationships so that there is trust that we can get access to that data. I happen to be on the board of directors of the Ag Data Coalition, which is being formed and is trying to create those kind of relationships with universities and with farmers so that there is confidence that we as researchers could use that data and do so in a manner that is not going to reveal privacy. So I think we're going to get there. I'm not exactly sure what the path is going to be, but I think there is huge incentive that we are going to sort through in a matter of very few years.
Great. Okay, we just have time for one more question, so we'll keep it fairly short. But Keith, you mentioned that there is the potential for a farm management sort of renaissance, research renaissance. And I was wondering, Melissa asked, what roles do you see for extension? Typically, we think of extension when I think of farm management in some capacity. And how can economists effectively communicate with audiences that they have traditionally not communicated with in the past? I guess that's two questions, actually, but if you can roll it into one answer, that'd be great.
I think the excitement about farm management, for example, just had a conversation. One of my colleagues was at a conference and talked to a vendor who has farm management software that they were very excited about. And I think we're going to see the nature of farm management change because the data that the farmer can have at their fingertips sitting at a desk in front of a computer screen. I think that is something that we probably need to be incorporating into our classrooms. And in terms of from the extension standpoint, absolutely, we're going, I think there is an area, we've got people in our profession, Shannon Farrell at Oak State, Terry Griffin at K-State, and others that I think of that are out there doing a lot of presentations that are trying to explain people just what is the nature of this data that you have, what are the issues surrounding it, how can you use it. But I think we're going to go back. The economics is still going to be fundamental farm management, production functions, and profit maximization, and risk management, and those kind of issues. But we're going to be using new data and new opportunities to explore that data. And the buzzword is it's going to be at a more granular level. Instead of managing at the farm level, we're going to manage at the pixel level in a field.
Great, thanks so much, Keith.
Okay.